We'll give you a minute. Okay, so we can start on time, which is fantastic. So I'd like to begin by welcoming all the members of the committee, which is fantastic. It's really great to see old friends and new members on the Skills Committee, and by welcoming any members of the press and public who have joined us either today in Huntingdon or anyone watching our meeting on our live stream. The Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or tweet during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everybody at present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place? There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will move to a muster point, which is in the High Street. I would remind members and officers that the meeting will be recorded, so I hope that's all right with everybody. So first of all, I would like to start by welcoming two new members of the committee who are with us today, Sam Carling from Cambridge City Council and Sam Wakeford from Huntingdon District Council. So two new Sams, very welcome, very good to see you. Peter MacDonald unfortunately isn't able to be with us today, but he will be joining the committee from South Cambridgeshire. And I don't think we have any further apologies, thank goodness. No, so that's excellent, thank you. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest on any item being considered today? No declarations of interest, great. And if something does come up during the meeting, feel free to just say so. So item 1.2 is the approval of the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of March 2022, and we're being asked to confirm those as an accurate record. Does any member wish to raise any questions on the accuracy of the minutes? And if so, could you indicate now? One?
Chair, it's my question, sort of relates to that particular issue, but if you want me to bring it up now, very happy to.
Would you like to raise that now then? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was quite difficult to put this question in any place because it was talking about a request for further information on an action that dates back to the November meeting when we received an answer to a question. It's the same question that you see that we presented this time around. Effectively, we were asking about how many companies have been approached in the process and the criteria used to select them. And you were able to answer the process at that time, but hadn't really got to the stage of having really anyone buying into it. So it's about how one deals with the actions that come from the minutes of the papers. That's clear. But in terms of the questions, if they're not fully answered, whether that could be fitted in and we could get the answer if you like.
Thank you. I think our next item is on the action log. So if we take the answer to your question as part of Fliss's response on the action log, are you happy with that, Fliss? Okay, thank you. In which case, I think we will take the minutes as accurate, and I will sign those shortly. And then I will hand to Fliss for the next item on the action log. And maybe if you could pick up the question in your response on that, Fliss, is that okay? Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Coles, is therefore the question that you're asking not currently on the action log? Does it predate the action log of something that's been previously closed?
I think the problem is that when we ask a question and it's not fully answered at the time, that there isn't a way of recognising it. I'm just wondering whether that could be included so that if we are missing information that we asked for, at least there's an action log that we could refer back to, because we took some time to find this one to see exactly when it was asked originally.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Noted. So the first action here, which goes back to the 10th of November, was talking about understanding, it was in relation to the employment and skills strategy, and we have talked here about the matter of destination data on residency, and we continue to look at the impact of the evaluation of AEB, and when we have that, it's normally on an R14 basis, so that comes in November time, then we'll be able to provide more of the impact then, so it's on a cyclical basis. in understanding the destination data there. There's also a new unit that's being set up, which is called, I think it's a Future Skills unit, of which they're currently central government are looking at having a robust set of data across the whole of the country, of which it will be useful for us to be able to track data. So there's currently work going being undertaken centrally, which will give us more robust data that can be analysed at a national level. In terms of the deep dive, so going to minute note 50 for the budget and performance report, the deep dive panel is currently meeting, I believe, this week to further review the status of the deep dive. So that is still ongoing. And then we have the digital skills bootcamps update about the age of learners, and information's been pulled together for that. If it hasn't been circulated, I believe it has, but if it hasn't, that will go out subsequent to this meeting, looking at the demographics of the skills bootcamps. Sorry, do I need to speak a bit louder? Am I not close enough to the mic? Is that better? Yes. Okay, apologies. It's a better place this time round. So that is those actions there. Action that's outstanding, Councillor Coles, and perhaps we can pick up outside of the meeting.
I'm just wondering whether there's something that we want to add to the action log about. I think it would be helpful for us to make sure that we've got clarity in the action log on when questions that come from overview and scrutiny haven't been completed. So maybe that's something that Tamar can take up. To make sure that that is being recorded and that we are reporting back on that, because I can see that there might be a sort of a slight gap in that you've had half an answer to a question and not a full answer, which I think was the point that you were raising. Tamar, are you happy to pick that up? That's brilliant. Wonderful. Okay, are there any other comments or questions on the action log? Fantastic. In which case, I think we will move on to item 1.3, which is public questions. We have received a public question from Anthony Carpen, and he has asked that his question be read out by the Democratic Services Officer at committee on his behalf. So, Tamar, over to you.
Okay, the Learning and Work Institute, previously the National Adult Education Union, published their 2021 Adult Participation in Learning Survey. It found 3 themes of barriers to learning: situational, e.g. lack of transport, childcare; dispositional, e.g. lack of confidence; and institutional, poor practices. I would be grateful if the committee could ask officers to produce a short paper responding to the findings and confirming that they will ensure lifelong learning providers not only respond to the local transport and connectivity consultation, but also encourage their staff and learners to respond as well, so as to ensure the transport barrier is addressed.
Thank you. And I have a response to Mr. Carpen's question that I will read out. So thank you for your question, Mr. Carpen, and your interest in adult education and skills in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Our vision is to work towards an employer and learning centred adult learning and skills system in our area, so we do welcome questions from citizens. Thank you for highlighting the Learning and Work Institute 2021 Adult Participation in Learning Survey and the 3 barriers to learning. On reflection, these do feature in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Employment and Skills Strategy and our commissioning plan for adult education. Our plan is to drive up quality of provision and enhance learner experience, including removing barriers like this to learning. For example, we provide funding for additional learning support and discretionary learning support funds to overcome barriers like these. I can confirm that all adult education providers have been requested to feed in their views to the local transport and connectivity plan consultation and to encourage their staff and providers to provide their input. And I'd just like to add a kind of personally that I'm particularly aware that transport is a huge barrier to education in our area for adult and younger learners. And combined authority officers do in fact work with the Learning and Work Institute and their sector organisations to inform the delivery of adult learning and skills and ensure that national research and insight informs best practice in our region. That's quite a broad general response. I think on Mr. Carpen's specific request for a specific report, I think I would prefer that we pick that up in our general work, and that this is already part of our reporting, and these barriers have already been recognised. So rather than bringing back a specific additional report, I think making sure that we are reporting on them explicitly in our general reporting is probably a better way forward. So I hope that's clear. A copy of the written response will be sent to Mr. Carpen following the meeting. We have also received a number of questions from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and a copy of those questions has been circulated electronically to all members of the committee in advance of the meeting. We will take the questions and responses at the start of the relevant item on the agenda. We have received, so I think the next one is the one we've already dealt with, so that's fine. In which case, unless there's anything else on those questions, we'll move on to part 2, which is the delivery section of our agenda. So item 2.1. And to start this, we will go to the overview and scrutiny question in relation to this report. Do we want the question before we'll stick with the question before the introduction, and then the officer may be able to respond to it. So Andy, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you very much, Chair. The question is we're concerned the report is unclear on whether the proposals relating to skills have been accepted. Could we have clarity provided on what will be progressed with what funding and the timeframes? And are project leads available who can provide more detail? And the issue for me is trying to identify what is skills related in a very broad number of things. If you look at the pages 32 and 33, it gives a list of 13 funded profiles that are selected. I can only find 12, maybe there's missing off the list, but my concern is that there's only a few that relate to purely skills at the bottom, one for Cambridge City and some to the Combined Authority wide, and none from my area or other areas as well. So I appreciate some of them are related to other items which cover particularly wider areas. So I think that's where there's a lack of clarity, and that's where I'd hope to get some clarity from FLIS if that's possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I have a written response, which I'm going to read out, but I think we can then pick up some of that in the discussion as well. So the projects within the local investment plan being drafted all remain provisional until the entire plan has been improved by DLUC before the autumn. Then the Combined Authority can work through the assurance with project leads to fully accept projects for funding and issue funding agreements or contracts. Currently, all the projects listed in the appendix to the report are proposed to be included in the 3-year plan, all starting within this financial year, except for the People and Skills project, which I think are starting in year 3. But we'll have clarity on that in a minute. Project leads for each project have provided more details on each project in support of the development of the plan, and this added detail can be shared separately. I hope that's helpful. I think that the key thing is that this is still in development, and I know that there are some more things that may come forward. If we could now ask Steve Clark to introduce the report, and I'm hoping Steve will be joining us via Zoom. Is that what we're trying to set up? Is there? Okay. So Steve, whenever you're ready. Steve, whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Sorry.
Good morning. That's fine. Welcome. It's very good that you're here and we can hear you. So if you're happy to introduce the report, that would be great.
Fantastic. Okay, so this report provides an update on the progress to collectively develop the Shared Prosperity Investment Plan for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The list of projects thus far developed to be included in the local investment plan is provided in headline form with this report. The paper also outlines the process and governance mechanisms to approve the local investment plan and some indication of how to manage delivery of the funding to projects going forwards. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was introduced to succeed the European structural funds, which obviously are tapering out over the next year and a half. And on the 13th of April, the government launched the UK SPF prospectus guidance and all the details around indicative allocations. For CPCA, the indicative allocation for the core SPF which covers 3 pillars of communities in place, local business and people and skills, was 9.872 million. The multiply element, which I believe the Skills Committee have already had papers on before, this was awarded at just under 4 million and is primarily focused, as you know, on adult numeracy. The funding for SPF is tapering in from later this financial year through to its year 3 in 24-25. The people and skills element not commencing until year 3 of the funding. So the funding is also a mixture of revenue and capital, with a minimum level of capital that has to be spent in each year, rising from 10% in year 1 to 20% in year 3. The local investment plan has to be agreed by government before they'll release any funding allocation to lead authorities. And the local investment plan has to be submitted online during the window that's already open now until the 1st of August. And the first year's payment of approved plans is expected to come sometime in October this year. The development of the local investment plan has been led by the combined authority as it's in its capacity as the lead authority, but it has collaborated work together collectively with the Cambridgeshire Public Service Board, who were identified as the best existing group of local stakeholders to help support, guide, and form that consultative support function, acting in the capacity as the SPF Partnership Board. The local authorities and public sector partners on the CPSB have all been working together on the priorities of the local investment plan, with the organisations on the CPSB having developed and helped propose local investment projects in the 2 pillars of communities in place and local business. They've fed those particular priorities, they've included interventions which also details the challenges and opportunities they address. Those priorities have been fed into us as the combined authority, alongside the CPCA proposing its own projects in the people and skills pillar, based on strategically area-wide projects that are featured from the employment and skills strategy. CPCA officers have coordinated and collated all of the projects, which you see listed, appended to this report, conducted analysis and challenge across those projects. We've also had analysis done by the Cambridgeshire Clinical Commissioning Group on health priorities and the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office on a match up to community safety priorities. And also in parallel, the CPCA's own evaluation team has undertaken analysis against the 6 capitals in the Strategic Growth Ambition strategy. The full list of projects and interventions proposed is included in the paper, and the breakdown of each pillar basically goes 25 projects proposed in communities in place, 16 projects proposed in local business, and 4 projects proposed in people and skills. The final list of each projects in each pillar has been agreed with the CPSB, and we're currently drafting the narrative for the actual investment plan, which CPCA officers will complete imminently, ready for posting online. Of the collective input to date has been also in parallel an approval of local authority chief executives and their economic development teams. All the MPs were consulted, or their constituency teams. This briefing took place last Friday, and so we don't need necessarily their full backing for the plan, but we've now written on the back of that to gain their endorsement. The business board will be presented to next week. And the draft plan as you see it, is presented to leaders this Wednesday. And the final work beyond that will focus on getting final approval at the Combined Authority Board on the 27th of July. And that's my introduction, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Steve. That's very clear. Pam, it's the button in the middle.
In the middle.
It's got no written above it, which looks slightly surprising, but press it. You may have.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Yes. I'm not very good with this sort of thing. Yeah, thank you for that summary, Steve, because I was concerned when I read this for the first time, I might add, that I on several things, but mostly because under the skills and people provision, which is what I'm particularly interested in, which is this is the skills committee, of course, there's only 4 matters mentioned, 3 of which are extremely wide, one of which is for Cambridge City. And of those other 3, one is giving more money to Growth Works that's already got money, and will presumably be having a lot more as a result of this. And the Age Careers Service, All Age Careers Service, which talks about schools that have to do their own careers anyway, and adults that have got funding for that. I wondered why they were chosen, because I'm a bit concerned that and I know actually that at Peterborough City it hasn't been finalised, and there's going to be a meeting on Tuesday, I believe, because the main officer for Peterborough has had COVID now for the past week. And so I think all in all, I was pretty concerned about how this had progressed and how far Peterborough had been involved in it, because of course that's where I'm from. So could you give me those answers first of all, please?
Steve, do you want me to?
Yes, but you can go if you want, Fliss.
Okay. So just to hopefully provide you some assurance, when we first met with the CPSB, it was decided that we should be looking at some strategic wide projects for the whole of the combined authority, and that the area where there is more support to work collaboratively is in the skills arena. And so, as you'll see as well, so one of the things that Steve, I don't think mentioned in his introduction, is that rather unhelpfully, perhaps by central government, they provided individual allocations for every district area. And so therefore, trying to look at projects holistically across the whole of the combined authority has perhaps been more challenging, because though the combined authority is a lead authority, every district has a notional allocation. And so therefore, to work collaboratively, it was decided at CPSB that for the first 2 years where skills is not funded, that we would look at individual projects for each of the districts under place and community and also business. And then when we looked to the final year for skills, that we would look at strategic projects, because therefore that is where we would gain most by pulling together the resources and therefore being able to get more outputs in a strategic focus. ESF funding comes to an end in 2023. The people and skills pillar is in 2024. And so this is to continue some of the provision that's already there, where the funding will come to an end. So whilst it might not be actual Growth Works for Skills, the delivery arm, who are doing it, it will be making sure that we continue that provision for Growth Works for Skills, where we're having that honest skills brokerage, because currently there's no other funding to be able to take that forward. And then also to combine that with the region of learning, which is really successful in the south of the area. And that's looking at really innovative software. So that those 2 ESF projects comes to an end. And so therefore, as it's part of the skills strategy, it will be the continuation of those 2 projects combined together to take the best bits from both of those projects. When we look at the All Age Careers Service, this is recognising that careers provision currently does not deliver what we need it to. And so therefore additional funding in careers, making sure that it's aligned throughout the whole of somebody's journey, is where we think we'll be able to add most value. So this is recognising where there are significant challenges across the whole of the combined authority and working strategically so every district will gain from the projects being proposed. And all of these projects are in the employment and skills strategy, which was unanimously approved. Sorry, long-winded answer.
Thank you for it. It would have been nice to have known, if you see what I mean, because I read through this and thought, whatever's going on that I've never heard of before. Now, that may be the fault at Peterborough, where I've not been told things, but I equally think that it would have been very helpful to have had a meeting, Fliss, beforehand, so that we four and anybody, we could have had a meeting to actually understand what was going on. Because I spent a lot of time over this weekend, because I don't get the papers until a week beforehand. I actually have to have them copied because I can't see online properly at all. And so by the time I get them, I've virtually got the weekend to deal with it. And there was nobody to speak to up until yesterday afternoon because our officer had got COVID and she had to ring through to me with COVID and etc. So I'm a little bit concerned about getting these long reports that I know nothing about. And I think that's happened in the past where we've talked about the long report. So I'm sure there's an answer to all of this. But equally, now it will have to go forward, I think, to Tuesday when the Peterborough officers will be involved, I'm sure, with Steve. And as long as they understand, then that's okay. But it would have been good to have understood myself. So, you know, there we go. I think I did actually have something else to say. Yes, because my concern as well over it was that most of the things talked about are digital, but not everybody has got a digital can go on to digital, particularly in adult matters. You know, the elderly people, there is an assumption everybody is online, and they're not. And they're certainly not in Peterborough. So if I could just mention that as well. I'm sure they're not in other parts of the county. I just happen to know Peterborough, of course. So if I could just have those points noted, because and I don't know, are we still talking about this working draft that was sent as well? There was a working draft in here, and I had a particular concern over one of the entries on the working draft. I mean, are we coming to that subsequently, Lucy, or what are we doing?
Can I just say very quickly that I do understand that people have had a large number of papers that came this week. I think it's worth pointing out that the government only launched the prospectus on the 13th of April. And they're expecting us to kind of do all this work on it. Yeah. And that actually a lot of the work, we're very grateful at the Combined Authority that some of the work and the Public Services Board have managed to pick it up because it has needed to be done fairly quickly. I suppose one of the things that we perhaps need to pick up is that when work is being taken forward by the Public Services Board, if they could make sure that their members are quite well briefed, that would be helpful. So presumably Matt from Peterborough has been involved in that because he's on that board. So making sure that they're feeding in kind of at an individual level would probably be quite useful so that we here know what our individual councils are and how those discussions are going forward. I'm very happy to also feedback that if government would like to give us a little bit more warning of what they're going to dump on us, that would be great.
I think that's an extremely good point. And I think we found it in many areas. Absolutely. I agree with that completely. And what about the working draft? Do you want me to?
I think Fliss thinks that that's the next paper, which is multiply.
I beg your pardon.
Is that right?
That's all right.
Yeah, so I think we're referring to multiply. If it's a working draft for the investment plan, we're not submitting the UK SPF plan until the end of August. So if it's a core SPF, then there's, not the end of August, sorry, apologies, the end of July. So there's still time to comment, as that hasn't gone to combined authority board. That will be considered at combined authority board on the 27th of July.
But also from the point of view of this meeting, we've got that coming as the next, we will get that introduced as the next paper, I think, won't we? It's the, yeah. Liz.
Yes, I just wanted to endorse what has been said, and yes, please do feed back to central government that this really doesn't give us time to put together meaningful plans with the people who are on the ground. And I watched with interest, because I was at the ground floor on this, in the middle of it really, how this was put together. And I could see the frantic approach that our officers had to have in order to put these things together. CSP was virtually left off and had to be put back in again. So it hasn't been a good process. However, Fliss, I am delighted to hear that we're not going to lose out on the skills strategy, because what concerned me was because the skills strategy moves along at a slightly different pace from everything else, and our skills strategy still doesn't have its place-based plans in place, and therefore what I didn't want to see was our losing the strategies that we wanted to put in locally because of the skills strategy, and losing any funding based on that. And I'm pleased to hear that at least I think I've heard that that's not likely to happen, and we're not going to lose out just because of the way these funds have been placed in advance of our strategy.
Thank you. Do you feel free to respond if you want to, Fliss?
No, you're correct, Councillor Every. So therefore, I will talk about the employment and skills strategy in when we pick up that on the subsequent point. However, everything that we acknowledge as early actions within the employment and skills strategy are the areas that are being funded or being put forward for UK SPF.
Lynn.
Just one more question, sorry. Because I thought that this particular fund was replacing a European fund that actually, where money came in order to go to the third sector, the voluntary sector as well. Now, is there going to be anything involved in this money that's going to be moving through, as it were, from the combined authority to the various districts and the cities, and through to the voluntary sector? Well, will that not be possible? Because I think the fund originally was replacing almost like the sort of social fund as well, wasn't it? I think.
It is, and Steve,
if I've got that right, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, no, it is a replacement, although the SPF prospectus has been worded very carefully by government to say it's in each local area can decide whether they wish to continue with any of the existing funded provisions or not. And so, as was already been said, we agreed collectively at the Public Service Board that each local authority would look at its own area for projects. So, for example, Fenland had 31 projects locally that they sifted through to shortlist down to what they've proposed. So that's just one example, but the frantic work that went on, and this included projects that were currently being funded or are currently being funded by ESF and ERDF. So it's not been an automatic decision, and obviously we've had to manage sort of the expectation and the process with some of those particular organisations. We did consult quite early on with the ESF Providers Forum, where all of those current delivery partners meet, and obviously made them aware of the process that we were going to work through on a very local level, coming from the ground up. So I do believe within some of these projects there are organisations behind them who were previously in receipt of European funding.
Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you. Just on a matter of process, if I may, the report, which I guess was current at the time it was finalised, made reference to the fact that final details from us in Huntingdon to District Council were still awaited. I think on top of the tight government timescale described, we also had a change of administration here in Huntingdon that it's fair to say none of us were quite expecting, which was the reason officer colleagues took the precaution of asking for a little more time. I'm reliably informed officers have everything they need from us by now as of whatever deadline was agreed, but I just wanted to double check that before this moves onward.
Correct.
I can confirm that it's correct. Yeah, we've received everything from Hunts now. Yeah.
Sam, the other Sam.
Thank you. Yeah, two Sams in one day. Yeah, I just kind of want to second a couple of the other things that have been said in terms of perhaps having some kind of pre-meeting for this report, especially for the new members of the committee. This has been quite a sort of a quite a report to have to read, but no, it's been brilliant. One thing which I know came up in the last meeting, which I just wanted to touch on very, very briefly, was the decline in apprenticeships, which the sort of draft report underneath it brings up. Do we, and again, apologies if this has been discussed in previous committees, but do we have much reasoning behind why we've been hit worse compared to other areas nationally with declining in apprenticeships?
So we have seen this year actually that we've bounced back to pre-COVID levels in terms of apprenticeships. So therefore we have had quite a strong rebound. For some reason, this area doesn't seem to engage with apprenticeships as what some other areas do. And that's why we have Growth Works, who are currently working with employers to increase the number of apprenticeships by over 1,400 over the length of the contract. There are some areas that are affecting all of the provision in terms of apprenticeships. A number of level 2 apprenticeships have been withdrawn, so therefore we don't have as many standards, and because some of our skills levels are at the lower level, we see a particular impact of that, because therefore there aren't as many standards. It's probably something that we could bring a paper back to this committee actually, because it's multifaceted, and I could probably bend your ear for about an hour on that matter. So perhaps we bring that up for a forward plan.
Thank you. And we were discussing just before the meeting whether we might have a workshop session because there are a number of new members of the committee and an awful lot of other things are changing around us at the same time. So I think I will ask Fliss to get in touch with committee members and see if we can make a time for a sort of bringing people up to speed and a slightly more discussion-based session rather than a formal meeting to discuss some of these issues. Coming back to this item, I don't see any further questions. We are being asked to note the report and the next steps. I'm just wondering whether, Steve, if you could just make sure that we will understand exactly what the next steps are and where this is going next, that would be very helpful. And then we will consider it noted. So if you could just make very clear what those are, that would be great.
So just first to say, obviously at this stage, we welcome, Fliss and I welcome any feedback on the plan to build it out. But as I outlined in the report, the next steps are, it goes in front of the leaders for discussion this Wednesday. It goes to the business board for a similar consultation that we've done today with the skills committee. And then it goes finally to the combined authority board on the 27th. So by mid-July, the paper deadline for that particular board will be closing. So we will have needed to have gathered in comments, views, and everything we can by then to finalise the plan.
Thank you. That's fantastically helpful. Are we all happy that we've noted the report and moved on to the next step? So thank you all. We will now move on to the next item. I don't think we need to take a vote on it, do we, Tamar, because we're just noting it. So the next item is 2.2, the local multiply local investment plan, and Fliss is going to introduce this one. Is that right?
Apologies. I wanted to raise a point just on the working draft of this UK Prosperity Fund.
I think that's what we're going to do now. I think
Is that on the previous paper? No, it's previous
okay,
paper.
I'm sorry. In that case, I think there was a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Do raise it now, Lynn.
The
That's
number
completely
is
fine.
not easy. I know. Only because I was just a little bit concerned on page 50, which is page 14 of the working draft. It was figure 8, education institutions and AEB providers across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Now, I didn't know whether that meant that the education institution had to be an AEB provider or not, or was it separate? But either way, I wondered why Inspire Education Group and Peterborough College were both mentioned. And also, where was, since the University of Cambridge is in there, where is ARU Cambridge? Do you see what I mean? So I'm wondering whether it was completely accurate. That's all. And if somebody would look at it again, because I couldn't. The title was a little bit. You know, you could interpret it two ways. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, duly noted. We can review the diagram. I don't think it's meant to be education institutes that only do AEB. I think it's meant to be both. So we'll get that reviewed, that particular diagram. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. In which case we will now move to Multiply and Fliss.
Thank you. So this paper introduces a paper that was approved at the Combined Authority Board last Monday. As Steve's already mentioned, UK SPF is broken into two funding pots. One is the core SPF and the latter is Multiply. We've received 3.999186 million. I should have just said circa 4 million. That would have been easier, wouldn't it? Over a 3-year programme. And likewise with the core SPF, we also needed to submit an investment plan. This investment plan was submitted to the Department for Education on Thursday, and the Combined Authority Board approved delegation to the Chief Executive to sign that paper off. Key points to note about the Multiply programme. The main objective of the programme is to increase the levels of functional numeracy in adults across the United Kingdom. And there are 3 measures of success. One is more adults achieving maths qualification courses up to and including level 2. Second is to have improved labour outcomes. And finally is to increase adult numeracy across the population. So as part of the investment plan, we looked at data points that we have access to at the Combined Authority and have chosen a number of areas of which we would like to focus the funds on. Key points to note are that this cannot be provision that's already funded via AEB, and so therefore this needs to provide additionality. I think one of the very natures that we're looking at those people furthest from learning is that we also need to have significant engagement and attract those learners who would not engage with numeracy. So a number of interventions that we're looking at are looking at family learning. So looking at where our young people aren't achieving those level 2 qualifications. So working with schools, so look at how we can engage with parents. So therefore looking at parents and also our young people's numeracy levels. And then also a strong focus within the workplace as well, recognising that we should be supporting in-work progression, especially for those who are on low wages. So what we've done at the moment is, so the investment plan's been submitted. We currently have our AEB commissioning round for our independent training providers, and Multiply is one of those lots that we're currently out tendering for. And then we'll also start negotiations with our grant providers as well for how they will be delivering on this as well. To pull the investment plan together, we have engaged quite widely and we have consulted with all of our providers at the moment, as well as engaging with ERBs. So this is for note, and I would welcome any comments that you have. Thank you. And really sorry, it's a good news story. It's additional £4 million into the Combined Authority to help with our residents with lower skills. And so therefore, really good additional pot of money over 3 years that we are excited to have received. Thank you.
Can I just, because I wasn't conscious of this multiply. I mean, I don't know how long it's been around, but I've only been on the skills committee this past year, as you know. So I didn't know about it. And I wondered where the £4 million was going. and it's already been decided by the board. So it's sort of a done deal already, as far as this committee is concerned. And I just wanted to say that. But
so this comes back to exactly the same point, that this is also part of the funding bid that was first published by government on the 13th of April. So it's not surprising that we haven't met. I mean, we haven't seen it because government only announced it on the 13th of April with a deadline to get something back by the 30th of June. And I do think that for government to announce a fund on the 13th of April with a deadline to get it back kind of 6 weeks later, including having local elections, Easter and a Jubilee bank holiday in between, is quite unreasonable. And I think we had sort of said that we would feed that back to government. I think it's so at this point of the meeting, I'm going to ask you whether you would like me, as the chair of this committee, to either write individually, but I think it might be more useful to contact some of our other. I know that this business about having really short deadlines is something that is being grumbled about a good deal by a number of organisations, one of which is CCN, but we could certainly also talk to other combined authorities who will have been having to face exactly the same tight deadlines that we have done. So I don't know whether you would like me to take that forward as a separate thing from this committee, or to work with other combined authorities or other council networks to send something in saying, actually, we don't think this is not good governance.
I think both. What I would like to say is whether, because on the schools committee, and I applaud that we have 2 youngsters on our committee, brought the average age down hugely, this is great, was that we don't necessarily, as skills members, get information direct. So it goes into our councils, it's dealt with by whoever's dealing with it, we are on catch up. Is it possible to give us heads up as skill committee members that of what's coming? Oh, we've got a bid coming for this. Then we can go into our own establishments and make sure we go to the right places to find the right people who are putting these or who are being involved. I mean, these councils, it's fine, I know these, but the heads up of those funds, I would find really, really useful, if that's at all possible. Me too.
Yeah, point noted. I think, unfortunately, this time round, because we had local elections, the skills committee that would have normally sat was pulled. And so therefore, we find ourselves in a time where we've been in extraordinary circumstances. I take your point, and I will make sure that is, as soon as we hear that we have funds available to us, and I will notify this committee. Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Any other comments on the paper? I mean, on the on the content of the paper as well as Sam.
Yeah, again, just to second that, and I think it comes up on several other items on the agenda as well, like decisions that have already been taken. It's not ideal, but I assume a lot of the later ones is also down to this 13th of April. Yeah, great. Yeah, so I mean, generally, I'm really, really impressed with all of this that's going on. We all know that adult numeracy is there's a horrendous problem with it nationwide, really. Something that's just come to me is kind of, are we doing much about adult literacy as well? Just because although the rates of that are much higher, there is still sort of about a 16% rate of functional illiteracy among adults. I'm just wondering if we're working on that at the same time. Obviously not under this initiative, but.
I think we were surprised that the UK SPF is only for numeracy and not literacy. So that's a central government decision. However, we do have our adult education budget, and we will be able to, Parminder would be, I'm not going to put Parminder on the spot, but we can inform you of the current provision that we have under that. So yes, we do. This is just a national scheme with a national focus on numeracy.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this report? I don't see any other questions. So we will note the outcome of the combined authority decision, which was taken on the 27th of June. I move on to item 2.3, which is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough growth strategy, and is going to be introduced by Alan Downton, I think. Is Alan there? Yes.
Good morning, Skills Committee. Excuse me. The economic growth strategy builds on the fundamentals of the economy set out in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Economic Review and reflects the data that has emerged as a result of leaving the European Union and the effects of COVID-19. Like the, like the skills and employment strategy that FLIS has developed, we've used Metrodynamics for this. So there's some commonality there. And this is very much data driven. The complementary employment and skills strategy was endorsed by your good selves back in January, and the economic growth strategy incorporates the main priorities from that strategy and is consistent with it. The economic growth strategy has been consulted on and had input from the business board and the mayor, and has been developed through workshops with a wide circle of partners and stakeholders, including the business advisory panel, all of the constituent local authority CEOs and economic development officers. In addition, the chair and vice chair of the business board, officers in the combined authority, and the mayor convened individual meetings with each of the local authority leaders. Feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. On the 5th of April, the business board and combined authority met in its first workshop, and one of the discussions was seeking feedback on how they felt the consultation process and timeline for developing the economic growth strategy had been. Again, feedback was positive. Unfortunately, due to the timeline, this paper has already been endorsed by the business board and the combined authority last week. The economic growth strategy is designed to reinforce a sustainable growth approach agreed by the combined authority board. Its primary goal is to reduce inequality and drive levelling up within the and between the three economies of Peterborough, Fenland, and Greater Cambridge. Its goal is not economic growth for its own sake, but to drive growth in a way that harnesses the unique assets and strengths of our places and businesses. Let me just step forward. The strategy has 6 core priorities for economic growth. 2 of them are cross-cutting. One is reduce inequalities and improve quality of life. The other one is accelerating local placemaking and renewal. And below that, we've got 4 pillars. Ensuring transition to green, low carbon economy, accelerating business growth, creating good quality jobs in high performing businesses, and supporting people to develop quality skills in a world-class system. The strategy recommends these are delivered through a series of program themes, each tailored to meet the needs of the 3 economies and to maximize economic linkages. And these are expand programs of business support, inward investment, innovation, obviously skills and employment, support for good jobs, investment in local placemaking and renewal, connectivity. This strategy will work alongside the new employment and skill strategy. This strategy will be reviewed on an annual basis. Basically, we've got also work underway at the moment. So next steps are we're producing an implementation plan, and this will be part of the discussions for the second workshop between the combined authority and the business board on the 5th of September. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liz.
Thank you, Alan. Well, in view of the fact this has already gone to the board and we're noting it, we take your point. I would like to actually refer to quite specifically to page 128, which is about rising unemployment and inactivity among the over 50s. I'm going to focus on the youth unemployment. One of the things I find really difficult is to pull together all the initiatives that there are that are supporting youth. The NEETs, the post-NEETs, it's in counties, we do some of it here and so on. There's no overall picture, unless I've missed it, about what's actually happening, or no overall strategy that I can see, which pulls them together. I may be wrong, pulls in all of these, I am wrong, pulls in all these activities. So I have a picture really of what's actually happening to support youth across our own regions. That would be really helpful to me, and I'm sure it's there. So you're going to tell me it's there, and you're going to tell me where I'm going to get it, aren't you, Fliss? That'd be really good.
Not quite. However, Matt Oliver is leading on the NEET strategy, and what we've agreed is that youth will come as one work stream, one pillar within the employment and skills strategy. So therefore we will bring in the work that's currently being taken for NEETs across the combined authority area, and also other elements as well, which will come together under one strand. So there is some work that's already been done, and we do meet regularly a NEET strategy group that brings in all the different areas of youth interventions and activities across the county combined authority area. So it's more joined up than what it ever has been before, actually. And so therefore, but we will give visibility to that underneath the employment and skills strategy.
But just point out that until we get our FE provision that's going to come to East Cambs, all of our youngsters, or most of our youngsters, leave East Cambs and go elsewhere, whereas in other areas that's not what happens. So we lose sight of them. So we lose sight of them, the ones that drift back as well. And all of that part of that strategy would be really helpful for us on the District Council to understand.
Could we put that on in the minutes to have a report on the NEET strategy to come to us at some point, even though I think it's not necessarily absolutely 100% our core business. I still think it would be really useful to be joining up across the whole geography. So if we could ask for that as a point to be added to the agenda, that would be great. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Lynn?
Thank you very much. It's just a bit of a repeat in a way, because here we are again with something that's already been agreed by the board. And, you know, if I'd seen it before or seen this before, I mean, I've seen the skills strategy before, of course, but not that. And it makes me wonder why we're here in a way when we haven't seen things before. I accept entirely what you said, Lucy. There's been elections and there's been, and we had a meeting that we missed out on. Well, if that comes again, can we perhaps please just have an update coming into us, as I think Liz commented on? That would be terribly useful, because then I shouldn't be sitting there thinking, well, what's the point of me doing this? But it's only that, it's really, is that's most important, that we know what's going on. And because we don't always, I have other things to do apart from constantly meeting up with officers in Peterborough. And, you know, if you could tell us what's coming into the future, that would be really, really good.
One thing that you might not thank me for this, but something that we do with the business board is in between formal committees, there is an update meeting. So it might be something that we could diarise. If we don't need them, we can stand them down. But so therefore there's a continuous flow of information. So that is something that we could do, which would not be a board, but would be an update. So you could receive that information.
Sure. And I can remember you offering that once before and it didn't happen. It's all I can remember. But I think that would be a very good thing.
So if we note that as an action.
Just to say that I think this one is slightly different from the previous two. The previous two were late because of government deadlines. This one is different in that it's our own internal document. It has been kicking around in the command authority for a while, and it has been to other places. And I think, the papers have been published because they went to different places, but they haven't been brought here or introduced by our officers. Did you have your hand up, Sam?
But not necessarily on that specifically. And no, I take certainly my understanding had been this had been in development for quite a long time, albeit coming into it fresh. And I suppose taking what has been pointed out around the kind of rationale for it being here in light of having been before board already. I suppose just on the recommendations, I certainly have no hesitation in endorsing it. I think particularly the focus on reducing equality, greater focus on that is important. And I guess it feels particularly right in light of the cost of living crisis that's sort of grown while this has been underway, which, as I say, underlines the focus previously. So this certainly feels a positive document, albeit with the questions about kind of sequencing our most useful input into it.
I think a draft of it may even have been discussed back in January or something. I think it has been around for a while. Anyway, it has been around for a while, but I agree. It's a good document now. Is there anybody else who has any comments on it? No. Okay, but it has been helpful in having it come here has been helpful in raising the needs question and the broader skills stuff. So that's very useful. Fliss, do you want to?
And I think the point to note is, Alan, that I think when building the implementation plan, that we also use the skills committee, and let's try and get this in the right order for the implementation plan.
Yes, so I've already taken that on board, Fliss, and I'm talking to Metro Dynamics. So we've got that on board at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. So I haven't heard any comments, anybody to disagree with anything actually in the strategy. So I hope that does mean that we can note this and endorse it to for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And on this one, I think it would be good to have a proposer and seconder for the recommendations. So would anyone like to propose it? Thank you, Sam. And Liz will second it. And all those in favour of noting and endorsing, if you could just raise your hands, that would be great. I think that's unanimous, even though Lynn hasn't waved at us, but I think it was. Okay, so we will move on to item 2.4, which is the GrowthWorks Management Review. And on this one, we have a question from Andy and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so we'll go there first.
Chair, thank you very much. I don't like being uncomplimentary about anything, but this, I think, is one of the worst reports I've read in my life. I'd just like to refer people to page 154, item 5.7. And if you can understand it, well, please let me know, because I've tried. Given the length of the contract and the fact it takes on average 18 months for an inward investment project to convert to a wind, the inward investment service line is focusing on pipeline conversion rather than active organic lead generation. However, the team is still sourcing 2 leads for every 1 lead sourced from DIT. I won't go on. And you look at the diagram underneath it, which doesn't match with what the notes are saying. Now, GrowthWorks is new. It's very innovative. It's doing things in a new way. I don't see a wind. I get a whiff of the farmyard with this sort of report. And when I see this sort of thing, I wonder, am I being told the truth, or am I being baffled with science and words that are unnecessary? A whole load of acronyms that I don't understand. No earlier definition of what they mean. The first time we saw a report from GrowthWorks, we asked for qualitative reporting rather than numbers. What we've got is even worse than that. And I'm sorry, this is not acceptable if you're trying to provide information to the public about this wonderful, innovative new idea to generate skills. So I try to be very polite about this, but I can even feel myself now getting slightly annoyed at the poor quality of this report. And I would just be very pleased to see something I could understand, that people can understand generally, and actually tells us how things are going, because this doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested because I'm not sure I agree. I will see whether I have a formal response. The formal response here is that the Interim Associate Director of Skills acknowledges the comments made and agrees that improvements can be made to this report. The author of the report will ensure that in future their introduction to the Paper Act Committee, performance on the contract will be explained clearly and able to assess the performance to date. I am going to go to Alan. I have to say that I think some of this might be, I love graphs. So maybe it's partly about how people like having their data presented. But I will go to Alan at this point. But Andy, if you want to pick up later on the things that Alan says, feel free to contribute in the discussion. Alan.
Good morning again, Skills Committee. Apologies, Nigel Parkinson, who's the non-executive chair of GrowthCo, which is a subsidiary of the Combined Authority, can't make today as he's on holiday in Ibiza. So I'll be reporting on the main aspects, but I'd like Fliss to update the committee on the skills element, please. Basically, this is the latest position to the end of May 22. We're roughly halfway through the contract, and the contract finishes on the 31st of December 2023. I note the comments, and we are reviewing the report. I had a meeting last week with the GrowthCo chair and a number of officers to talk about how we may update this going forward. So we are taking feedback from various parties because this goes to the business board and the CA board. And we've had complementary views, but obviously we need to take in your particular point. So thank you for that feedback. I think it's safe to say that there's 4 service lines within the GrowthWorks service. The skills service line, inward investment, and equity and capital grants are showing a strong performance. Unfortunately, growth coaching is not. If you look at the first table under 2.3, it just gives you the headlines of where we are against the overall performance against each of the service lines. I'll step through each of the service lines in detail. When you talk about growth coaching, which is one that we are monitoring carefully at the moment, this is all to do with coaching of high growth scale-up businesses. At the moment, the number of diagnostics is just above where it should be on the forecast. There are some concerns at the moment with this because the gap is closing. So the gap between the actual and the forecast is closing quite dramatically. One of the issues is that when we started the growth coaching service, the consortia were converting approximately 2.4 of every client onto the service, which in fairness for a program of this complexity and detail is quite good. You would normally look at 3 to 3.5. However, that position has worsened in the last quarter, and we're now at 5.1. So there is an investigation into why that is not hitting the mark. Secondly, as a result of not converting the diagnostics into potential clients, we've then got less clients signing up for the actual growth coaching service itself. And this is now, the performance has just dipped below the forecast line. Obviously, this report is till the 31st of May. It's not a full reflection on the whole of Q6, but I could supply the Skills Committee a further update when we get some more information on when Q6 completes, which is to the end of June. The other aspect that we're monitoring at the moment is as part of the coaching service line, there are what is effectively ERDF nudge grants. This is basically to pay for coaches, experts to work with clients to break down the barriers to their latest concerns or issues they have in growing. This is somewhat behind forecast at the moment. We've done an audit of the consortia partner. The processes and procedures are very robust, and officers and I are working with YTCO and Greatly Economic Growth Services, who are the prime, to understand what the issues are. And we are awaiting a recovery plan as we speak. If I could just go on. We've then got, so I've gone through the inward investment. Yes, I've noted your points, and actually there is a lot of jargon in there, and apologies there. I will simplify that, and I will look at sharing some information in a different format. The tables and the graphs have been well received, but I do take on your points at the moment. This is a very strong performance on the inward investment for the size of the operational unit. Obviously, we've got issues with DIT changing their operating model, and there's a lot less cohesion at the moment with DIT because they're retracting into London. from the regions, and it's posing us problems. But we are working with them to take that forward. On the equity and capital grants are ahead of profile. Out of all the monies that were allocated, we've only got £700,000 left for the programme. We believe these will be expended by December, which is ahead of profile. On the equity, we are slightly behind on the equity investments, partly due to the pipeline, but also the due diligence is taking longer than we had planned. We have clients available, and we are just working that through. We've got a very robust investment appraisal panel, which involves myself, Nitin Patel from the business board, and Nigel Parkinson with GEG. And I'm now going to hand over, if I could, just for Phyllis to talk through the skills, please.
Thank you, Alan. So the skills service line continues to perform well, and metrics are being met, and we expect them to meet their Q2 targets for this year as well. As always, though, there's more that can be done, and we continue to work with the team there to make sure that they're engaging with the most appropriate stakeholders and partners. Focus will be given to having, I guess, more strategic and operational conversations with our key FE colleges over the next quarter, and also working with what I'm calling multipliers and amplifiers. So pardon that is yet more jargon, but working more closely with our chambers, with the FSB, with IOD, to therefore make sure that we are making the best use of our networks to further reach and hit those targets. Overall performing well, and the Careers Hub, which Laura will talk about in the subsequent paper, is one of the highest performing careers hubs in the whole of the country. So we are seeing some good movement within GrowthWorks with skills. Thank you.
And if I may just go back to the point on 154, I note that I could have drafted that in a different format, and apologies for the confusion. I think it's basically just to say that they have such a healthy pipeline that actually they don't have to do much marketing for lead generation. And as it says there, we're sourcing 2 leads for every 1 source from DIT. So overall performance is still well ahead, and they've created a significant amount of jobs which are ahead of the contractual requirements. So apologies once again.
Thank you. Sam.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify something, on page 144, again, going back to the figure under section 2.3, it doesn't seem to match the text in that, we're talking about the overall performance of the program being solid, but apprenticeships and jobs are really behind on that table. I was kind of wondering, am I misunderstanding there, or is that? So
just bear with me while I get to 144.
With the target of 130, and I know obviously we're only halfway through the year, but for year 2, and we've got 10.
We'll see if you apprenticeships have huge intake in September and January too, and so therefore it's a whole year target, and so we expect that number to be higher. I don't know if it is 10, if it is 10 in there, so therefore the jobs. So I haven't got the paper open in front of me. One moment, let me just check.
It's showing, Fliss, 51 was the target for apprenticeships in year 1. We achieved 66. Year 2's 449. We're at 132.
Yeah, it's the one below, kind of the row about jobs, that I'm particularly concerned about.
I'm just trying to work out. I've just recently changed that, so the narrative. I need to go back to coaching, inward investment. Sorry, could I come back to you on a separate note on that? I'll clarify that position on that skills jobs line 4. Apologies.
It's fine. You haven't got it.
No, so in terms of apprenticeships, we're on with apprenticeships and I'm confident we'll hit those. Jobs is wider because that's linked to the whole of the contract, which Alan will come back
Okay,
to you
he'll
on.
come back in a second.
Yeah.
Fine, that's lovely. Okay, other Sam.
Thanks. No, my questions had been similar on the skills line, and for example, on apprenticeships, it's clear we had got overperformance on year one. From the trajectory in there, it wasn't clear to me that we were necessarily on track in the more positive way that was presented. But that explanation is, of course, helpful around the academic year timings and so on. So that is of use. I was going to ask whether we'd explored sort of the maybe it was felt to be so obvious it isn't discussed as directly, but the impact of presumably COVID and businesses in survival mode in terms of the job and apprenticeship creation of late, sort of explaining the challenge there is in those skills lines there. But I think between the answer you've already given for this and what is going to be come back to on the jobs point, I think that will probably cover my questions on that as well. Thank you.
I think it's worth noting, committee, if you don't mind, that the year one total jobs, which is 589, was exceeded by to 967. I appreciate against each of those service lines, it needs to be reflected, but we are in a very, very strong position on the jobs stroke apprenticeships perspective.
I found the line you mean now, Sam, and I can see what you mean. I am also confused about why it looks like that. Liz.
I don't know whether this is being researched at all, but we have obviously had information about the working at home that is now more prevalent than was. Is that having an impact on businesses taking on apprentices, particularly post 16 or more, well, and 18 as well, that they're not in the same kind of situation as they might have been when they were all at work in the workplace?
So I would expect that to be true. However, the data so far for this academic year has shown a bounce back, and so therefore it doesn't appear to be so. What I have spoken with our data team is to have a look at a bit more in detail at which standards are being taken forward, so which apprenticeships are being taken forward. We have seen a decline in the level 2, but that is more to do with the structure of the standards that have been taken forward, and the number of frameworks have been discontinued, and so therefore there are not so many opportunities at level 2. But I do think it'd be useful for us to bring back a paper around the whole of the apprenticeship data, so we'll take that forward. But currently we've bounced back, so apprenticeship starts are in keeping with pre-COVID.
I'm just wondering whether it would be, whether as an item for the committee, we've asked for an item on NEETs and on the kind of global picture. I wonder whether we could include apprenticeships within that so that it could be part of that one overall look at what's actually going on. Alan, were you going to come back after the meeting on the jobs line?
Yes, I'll send a separate
fine.
note via FLIST to your good selves just to explain that particular line.
Thank you.
It's just gone past me. I can't work out what that is. Sorry, apologies. I should know.
That's fine. Don't worry. Andy, you had a question, and then I've got one.
Chair, if you'll permit me, this is one of the issues I think which really irritated me, and you'll forgive my my irritation. 2.3, and we've heard from my colleagues. You've got figures there that don't seem to add up. You go to the next table, and then we've got the huge number of jobs committed there. You go to the further table, and the numbers are different again. So for me, it's not that this data is accurate or inaccurate. The way it's explained is impenetrable, and if I can't understand it, and I do have, goodness me, 14 years of experience in adult education, then why on earth are we producing this for public consumption? Because it just doesn't work. Just a very good illustration again of why I'm frustrated. Thank you.
I think well taken. Thank you. So I had two questions on this, which are probably things that I should already know. The first one is, how much of this in the job space and the report, there's an awful lot of stuff here on working with businesses. How much of that is it our responsibility as a committee to chase up, or is that mostly the responsibility of the business board? Because I have some questions that I'd quite like us to investigate, but I'm not quite sure whether the skills committee, maybe we should just do it. The thing I would like to ask actually is in terms of the business part that you introduced at the beginning, Alan, how much have we gone back to those businesses to ask them how useful or successful the work that had been done with those coaches had been? Because I think if we don't go back and ask whether what's being offered is successful, we won't be able to improve it.
We have an independent survey. We've already had 2 independent surveys of clients, which looks at quite a wide-ranging number of questions. I'm quite happy to share reports 1 and 2 with the committee if they require, or just the second one, which is more thorough, because the first one was conducted in January, which had a small sample size. The last one was in March, which has got a greater sample size. I'm happy to share that information with your good selves.
Thank you. I think we'd probably like to see both of those. That would be really helpful.
Yep. Thank
you. Are there any other questions? So, Liz.
Yes, just I'm in fact I was looking at that jobs line too, but I'm going to forget that now because Councillor Carlin's done a good job on that. So my question was to do with the inward investment, and I wasn't too sure how people apply for this, and I'm particularly interested, of course, again in Peterborough City, whether you've actually had any applications on this inward investment line from businesses in the Peterborough City, because the only ones that are mentioned are in Fenland and Cambridge. So if you could just tell me that, because I'd like to know that from my officers.
I would be surprised if we haven't had anything for the Peterborough area. I will have to furnish you some more information if I could on that. I haven't got that to hand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. I don't see any other hands. Again, this report is for noting. I think we've made quite a lot of comments on it. So I think we'll need to make sure that we follow those up and make sure that the things that I hope are now in the action log are taken forward over the next couple of weeks. But I don't think we need to take a vote on it. So thank you very much, Alan, for the report. And we'll move on to item 2.5, the expansion of the Careers Hub, which is Laura Geimer. Is Laura there? Yes. Hello, Laura. If you'd like to introduce that, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Skills Committee. Item 2.5 is the expansion of our Careers Hub. Skills Committee are being asked to note the approval of the Combined Authority Board on the 27th of June to accept Careers and Enterprise Company grant funding for an extended Careers Hub in the academic year of 22-23 for the recruitment of 2 new positions, which will both be employed by the Combined Authority. It's probably worth saying that it was intended for this paper to go to board on the 8th of June to give us sufficient time to recruit for these positions for a September start. But as I'm sure everybody's aware, this has been delayed slightly. You will see from the paper that following the launch of our first Careers Hub, which had 30 schools in, a proposal was submitted to the Careers and Enterprise Company back in March for us to be able to extend this model to cover all of our secondary schools in the region. Careers Hubs are a key feature within the Skills for Job white paper and have a positive impact on the performance of institutions in them against the Gatsby benchmarks, which results in better careers education for young people. Fliss mentioned it earlier, but it is a point worth noting that in the last academic year, not only is the performance of our schools within the Careers Hub exceeding national average, we are one of the better performing hubs in the whole of the country. What we've also done in the last academic year as being a Careers Hub is secure additional funding to run STEM-related activities that have been aligned to the local labour market within Fenland. We have continued to develop our labour market information site, which is allowing teachers, pupils and parents to access live real-time information that will support their decision making. And we're currently developing a regional microsite that specifically support those that have special educational needs or are working with those with special educational needs. The two roles that we've been funded for are a project officer, which is match funded, and a fully funded operations manager. This is additional resource to us in the region, really, really valuable because it allows us to further develop our relationships with key stakeholders. It allows us to support amplifying technical and vocational pathways. So playing into the point earlier about apprenticeships and technical education in the region, this allows us to engage with both teachers, parents and students and really show them the opportunities that exist. We'll be able to create further resources that will support parents and pupils, and we're really working to raise the profile of careers education, both with senior leaders in schools and with the wider business community. We'll be establishing a steering group which will help to inform and drive the performance of the Careers Hub, and it will give us a greater focus on system change, which will allow us to deliver upon the employment and skills strategy as well. We see it as really, really good news, and I hope you do too. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. That was great. I just wanted to point out again, I'm sorry that this is coming to us as for noting because it's already been to decision for the board. The reason for that is that we're only informed about the success of the bid on the 29th of April, and it is, as Laura has pointed out, important that we get on with recruiting these people as quickly as possible. Liz.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
If it had come to us first, I would have been just as delighted as I am now to hear about all of this, because this is an amazing next step. We were very pleased to get the Careers Hub in the first place, but we knew it didn't cover everybody, and now we're going to do this. And this is really synergy and collaboration working at its best. Thank you very much indeed, and well done you.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate the words. Thank you.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Lynn.
Can I just ask about Peterborough, please, and which schools are engaged in Peterborough? If you could just let me have a list, you know, on the email. You don't have to say now.
Yeah, of course I can.
But I'd be very interested to know which of the schools in the Peterborough local authority, you know, unitary authority, which ones are engaged with it. Thank you.
Not a problem.
I've just got one more question actually, which is that you talk about all the schools and colleges in our area. Presumably that includes the College of West Anglia, even though their main campus is in King's Lynn.
So Tower falls under our New Anglia in terms of a reporting point, New Anglia, but we do work with them from a campus point, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. This is very exciting, and we will look forward to hearing
thank you.
more success from it in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know, do we need to vote on this? I think it's just for noting, isn't it? So we will move on to item 2.6. Have I got that right? Which is the Employment and Skills Strategy Delivery Plan and Gain Share, which is Fliss.
Okay, so this is going to be part me and part Parminder. I think Parminder's, yeah, he's with us. So back in January 2022, it was this year, wasn't it? We, the Combined Authority Skills Committee and the Business Board unanimously supported the development and sign-off of the Employment and Skills Strategy. And one thing that I've always been very keen on is that it isn't just a strategy, but it's something that we have a robust implementation plan in how we take things forward. We've been working on the implementation plan, working on mapping and gapping of the existing activities since the plan, and whilst since the strategy was approved, and whilst the plan is in development, I just wanted to assure you that work is continuing and we are delivering on the strategy. So we've engaged with Metro Dynamics again, and we met with all the principals and also all of our AEB providers last week to have a look at the areas that we need to focus on to implement the strategy. In my point of view, there are 3 areas that we need to focus on. One is business as usual, and that is what we're already doing. And a lot of those actions will help nudge some of those stubborn metrics. In addition to the business as usual, we also have capital investment, and you'll note that we have a number of capital investments that, and bids that are being taken forward, and part of that is the FE cold spots. We've also recently, it was signed off last week, have supported the development of a LUF bid, so levelling up fund bid for Fendon District Council through Cower's proposal to take forward a new green technology centre at the Wisbech campus, and they have been successful in securing recycled local growth funds. So there's work that's going on the capital build. The part where I want the implementation plan to focus on is looking at how we change the system. So system-led change that will make a big difference. And that's why we're taking time on that, recognizing that we need to work with and engage with a number of different people and stakeholders to create the change that we need, that will not only nudge the dial, but will actually shift the dial. And so over the next couple of months, we're planning on engaging again at the same level as what we did for the employment and skills strategy, to make sure we have that implementation plan that is totally focused on hitting our most deprived and communities, and making sure that we tackle some of those stubborn challenges. So this is a very early stage of the implementation plan. You will see, though, that all of those early actions that were identified in the strategy, we are moving on the majority of them. And if we're not just moving on them, we have completed them as well. So it's really to give you assurance that whilst the implementation plan is still in development, work is actually continuing, and we are taking forward a number of those early actions. So unlike the majority of papers, this is really coming to you at an early stage to seek your engagement, your buy-in, support, comments and questions to make sure that we take it forward as the Skills Committee would like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't tell you how excited I am about this paper, Liz, and then Sam.
Yes, I wanted to thank you, Fliss and Parminder, on this. As you probably know, in East Cambs, we've actually asked Metro Dynamics to do a further survey and drill down on what's going on in East Cambs, so that we can work on this place-based approach, and also the systems approach that you're talking about, which is already beginning to happen for us. And I have to say, that the way this has worked, and I can only talk from East Cambs, is that the open and transparent way that this has been dealt with by officers for the CPCAI, who's been talking to us regularly, has visited us regularly, talks us through all the opportunities and that we have, and points us in the direction, but listens to what we have to say, is already being reflected, I think, in part of the work that is shown in this report. So I would like to thank, I'm sure the other areas are doing just the same, but I just wanted to say that on the ground that feels exactly like you've just said it should, and I think that's an important thing to say, and I would just like to thank the officers for the regular contact with us.
That is really reassuring and really good news. Thank you. Sam, and then the other Sam.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the strategy. And again, it's really nice to have it coming to us a bit earlier so we can look through it properly and have a chat about it. I've got 2 quick questions about the project initiation document for addressing the further education cold spots. And it's just number 1, it talks about encouraging active travel for presumably students at these new institutions. I'm just wondering, kind of, especially given the people going to them will be quite young, have we got sufficient infrastructure in terms of cycle lanes, etc., so that will actually, work, or is that going to need a bit more, work on it? And then my other question is, with the current gap, so it's talking about having another 2,000 students on each of these sites. Is there a demand there because students want to stay on education and can't, or is it from our perspective in terms of there's a lack of skills and therefore that's where the demand is, if that makes sense? That's my 2 questions. Thanks.
I would answer, but given that Parminder's leading on the PID, I'm going to hand that over to you, Parminder. please.
Thank you, Fliss, and thank you for your comments so far, members. On the active travel, just to say that infrastructure needs to be put in place, because the sites, as it says in the PIDs, have not been identified for the two FE provisions as yet. But it's definitely part of the vision for this provision is to have local provision, so that makes an impact on student travel. And part of the strategy is to facilitate and promote active travel as part of it. So that will be built into the design of the two projects. And then your wider question about I guess you're asking about the rationale. Is it to do with demand or is it to do with upskilling? I would say it's both things actually. So in terms of, if I just provide a bit of background context, which would be helpful in terms of the 16 to 18 and the 19 to 25 age group. We're working with the County Council, who have a legal responsibility to ensure that we have suitable and sufficient places in the area. They undertook a piece of work in 2019 that did some initial projections. We are going to rerun that piece of work, because obviously we now have more housing developments. We also have the 2011 census data. So in terms of the raw demand for places, that piece of work will help us to identify what that need looks like. You'll be aware that we have major housing developments in Wintringham and Loves Farm, and also in Ely and Solham as well. So all of these things will contribute. And then we have the demographic growth in terms of the birth rate, and the census data shows that. In terms of upskilling, in terms of the adult population, in the employment and skills strategy, that's been identified as a need. So the idea is that these two new provisions will be focused on technical education, and will be, in terms of the curriculum pathways, that work hasn't been finalised, or hasn't begun yet. Part of the next stage will be to undertake the feasibility study, which will look at those things in more detail in terms of looking very closely at the specific requirements in Huntingdonshire and St Neots, and similarly in East Cambs, in terms of what the labour market needs are, what the employer needs are, and to inform the curriculum design. So I would say it's both about demographic growth and projected demand, but also upskilling of existing workforce as well.
Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Sam.
Thanks. No, officers at my end at Huntingdonshire were similarly complimentary around the mode of engagement on this. We've been looped in closely, and we are very happy and keen for this to progress, and hopefully a swift establishment of the advisory boards as set out in the next steps in the paper. I think as Parminder did note, with reference to one of the developments, St Neots is with significant future growth around it, is very rapidly becoming an anomaly in being such a large town without FE provision. So anything that helps address that, and this is doing so in a tangible way, is hugely welcome, and grateful to my colleague for flagging the active travel interest as well, which again, for those who know, St Neots is going to be particularly important to help facilitate actual use of the site wherever it may be.
Thank you. I think all round positive. Lynn, did you want to say something? Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I was just looking. I'd looked through this project initiation document and thought how it was extremely interesting to have the creating 2 new colleges is what I think is the plan for East Cambs and in St Neots. And I wondered how much funding was involved in it and where the funding was coming from. So can somebody tell me about the monies involved in this?
Again, I can, but as it's Parminder's, do you want to answer, Parminder?
Thank you for that question. It's a good question, Councillor Ayres. So there is some funding that has been allocated by the Combined Authority through gain share over the next 3 years. And so the next stage of the process is for us to request a drawdown for some of that funding. There's 4.8 million that has been allocated. In terms of that funding, we need to undertake a feasibility study and complete business cases, which is the first stage of the process. And then the idea is that we use that funding, because it's a very modest amount of money for what we're trying to achieve, as leverage to access other Department for Education capital funding. So they normally have a competitive bidding process for those pots of money. So there's 2 pots of money that we're looking at. One is the FE transformation and one is the demographic growth fund for the next financial year. When we have our feasibility study, that will strengthen, and our business case, that will strengthen any applications that we make. And we will also be looking at other local capital funding that we can bring to develop these sites. Whether it's going to be a new college, we don't know. We don't know that at this point. And I think I need to make that very clear. We don't know. There's a number of options on the table. And part of the feasibility study will be to explore those options. In terms of revenue funding, obviously the Combined Authority has what will become the Skills Fund, which is pooling together of existing pots of money in terms of adult education. In terms of 16 to 18 funding, that is from the Education and Skills Funding Agency, and we've already begun the conversations with them, similarly as we've done with the districts, to alert them that we're undertaking this work. And if the feasibility study demonstrates that there is definitely a need and it would be financially viable, and there is an educational case and rationale for this new provision, that we will be looking to them to provide the 16 to 18 revenue funding stream as well. So if you like, early warning, early indications have been given to them about our intentions, and they're very interested in supporting us with this project if there is a need for the 16 to 18 bit. But the capital funding at the moment is a competitive process, and we believe that having the feasibility study, the evidence of need, having the buy-in from local stakeholders, and also having the match funding through the gain share will really strengthen our any applications that we make.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I don't see any more hands, and everyone seems to be very supportive. I'm certainly really excited to see these projects get to this stage, because I have to say this is one of the things that I was really keen that we take forward when I took over as chair last year, and it's amazing to see it have made so much progress over this year. So thank you very, very much, Fliss and Parminder in particular, for picking this up. Fingers crossed it carries on as smoothly as it has so far. So I think there is general consensus in support of the recommendations. If we could take those by show of hands, or actually if anyone disagrees with these recommendations, if you could raise your hand now. Oh, we need a proposer and a seconder. So if I could have a proposer and a seconder. Thank you, Sam, as a proposer. I'm happy to second. Thank you very much. And no dissent, I think. So you're happy with that? Wonderful. Let's carry on to 2.7, which is skills boot camps. And Melissa Gresswell, I think, is introducing this one. So Melissa, if you're ready, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Skills Committee. So the purpose of bringing this paper to the Skills Committee today is to notify the committee of the paper that went to the Combined Authority Board on the 30th of March, and that was for approval following securing just under 4.9 million of grant funding for Wave 3 Skills Bootcamp provision. So this funding is coming from DFE through the National Skills Fund. And just as a sort of quick reminder, skills bootcamps are for individuals aged 19 plus and can span across unemployed, employed, self-employed, and those who are returning to work who have been out of the workplace for a period of time. They do aim to address the needs of employers and the local economy, and so we'll be looking to deliver targeted interventions and helping employers to fill specific skills shortages through vacancies and enabling employers essentially to become more productive more quickly. So the Wave 3 Skills Bootcamp funding will facilitate flexible training, that's for up to 16 weeks to over 1,700 learners between now and March 2023. The provision will largely be at level 3, and that will be across a number of sectors, including digital, construction and green, with green spanning level 2 to level 4. We will also look at delivering across technical and logistics, and we are exploring demand to pilot a pathway to accelerated apprenticeship bootcamp. So the Wave 2 funding was secured previously through a competitive tender process, but this time round for Wave 3, we were given the opportunity to apply for grant funding. So this essentially allows us to have greater flexibility around where the demand lies for the provision. And Wave 3 will specifically focus on the CPCA area as a priority rather than the whole of East of England. So the paper was approved at CA board with the recommendations of accepting the grant funding, creating a new budget line, and also delegating authority to the chief exec, and that is to enter into, sign and award grant agreements to training providers or through appropriate procurement exercise. So since that has taken place, there has been significant work undertaken. So we are currently in standstill period until the end of this week, following a procurement exercise. So we're looking to be issuing contracts at the beginning of next week to training providers to start mobilising delivery for boot camps beginning August, September, October. We didn't appoint as many providers as perhaps we'd like to, so we are exploring other options at the moment to maximise the funds, such as direct awards. And we've also recruited and appointed 3 people into skills bootcamp roles due to start in the coming weeks. And that will span across project manager, data and finance coordinator, and a compliance coordinator as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Melissa. Any comments on this paper, Sam?
Only that, again, sort of it would have been good to see it some time ago because it's been 3 months since it was approved at board, and it might have been nice for us to have it at a previous meeting, but you know, I'm really happy with the paper.
Yeah, so the last skills committee that sat, there was a paper on boot camps, and we missed the deadline of, due to the paper deadlines, I gave a verbal update that we have secured the money. So appreciate you weren't here. So it is the next committee, and we did receive an update at the last one as well. This was just to note that the combined authority had approved the recommendations. Given that so it's just been a long time, unusually long time.
Chair, I just wondered, one of the issues, just going back on what Councillor Carling said, he wasn't obviously here, one of the issues we've had in the past is actually recruiting people onto these courses. So I'm just wondering whether anything has changed that will make this happen, or whether there are new strategies to get people to apply and obviously succeed.
I will take that. Sorry, Liz, maybe you can add it in there. So I think the point to note is that this is grant funded, and so therefore we are able to work with different providers, and we will be able to have more control over the providers that we are working with. And as part of the procurement exercise, everybody's had to. So we haven't awarded any grant funding. Even our grant funded providers have gone through the procurement exercise, and there was strong weighting on employer engagement. And so therefore providers have not been selected unless they had scored appropriately for employer engagement, because I think that's what's been missing in the past.
Thank you. I think that the fact that it is grant funding is really welcome, because it does allow us that greater flexibility. Any further questions on this? We will look forward to further updates on how it's going. Yes, absolutely, Fliss.
I just want to make a comment. Given that our adult education budget is circa £12 million, this is an additional £5 million within a shorter time frame. So it's 9 months. So this is a huge investment into the skills landscape in the combined authority area. We're determined to make this succeed. And we are expecting an additional 2 years of funding in this area as well. So it is a huge investment and additional set of monies we have.
Lynn.
Yeah, I'd like to know where the employers are who are taking this up, because I know that there had been a problem in getting employers engaged in Peterborough because they can't find the staff at the moment. I mean, one of the major problems we have in Peterborough is not so much a lack of jobs, it's they're finding the staff who are skilled to do the jobs, etc. And so I'm just interested if you, I mean, again, you don't have to tell me now, but I mean, if we could know where these boot camps, where they are taking on employers, as it were, because that's certainly what's happening in Peterborough.
Yeah, so as soon as delivery starts, the onus is on the providers to engage with the employers. So we will bring an update on performance. Thank you.
Thank you. And a huge congratulations to the team on getting this amazing new amount of funding. Getting funding out of government at the moment is not very easy. So it is amazing that we've got this amount of money, and it is now just a big responsibility on all of us to make sure that we spend it well, because it's very much needed in this area by employers and by the individuals who will be undertaking the training. So it is really good news, and we will look forward to many further updates on how this is going. But thank you very much, Melissa and Fliss, for your work on this, and we'll look forward to our next update. The report is for noting, so no vote is required, and we will move on to item 2.8, which is John Alsop on the budget and performance report. And I'd just like to say it's very nice to have you with us, John, but it's also very sad not to have Vanessa with us. So I don't think that we have necessarily noted our thanks to her as a skills committee. So I think before we move to John's report, we would like to note our thanks to Vanessa, who reported on our budget and has moved on to another exciting new job, I think. But John, thank you for taking this up for us, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you very much. And it might be an opportunity for me to introduce you to Julia Hoban. So Julia has recently joined us. She's an interim, and she'll be taking over from Vanessa. But as you say, I mean, Vanessa, it's great to see that she's got a new opportunity, which is great for her. Obviously, a loss to us, but we welcome Julia to support the committee and the officer team going forward. So thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this paper gives us an update to the revenue budgets for projects and programmes relevant to the Skills Committee for the 2021-22 financial year. Good progress is being made in the preparation of the combined authorities' financial statements and for its subsidiary companies. So the forecast outturn position, as in these papers, are still subject to final year-end adjustments and to audit, which we are expecting to take place later in the year. And the paper will be going to the July board meeting on the final expected outturn position, and to request confirmation of any unspent carry forward balances that will be carried forward into the new financial year. So there's a summary of the directly attributable funds receivable to skills projects, which is set out in paragraph 3.1, and the latest outturn forecast of expenditure against budget is set out in the table under paragraph 3.2. The expected outturn position shows a forecast underspend against budget for the year of about £1.9 million. And the majority of that underspend, as members will be aware, relates to the AEB programme. Paragraph 3.4 provides some of the detail of the work currently being undertaken to address delivery issues relating to the underspend. But again, members will be aware that firstly, funding is over an academic year rather than a financial year, and it's a ring-fenced fund, so any underspend will be carried forward into the new financial year. There's further detail on other outturn positions, again under paragraph 3.4, and again with the majority of unspent balances that are of interest to the Skills Committee being carried forward into 2022-23. We also have under this paper an appendix showing the skills performance dashboard with an update on delivery against growth outcomes, and it also shows the current RAG status for skills projects. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to questions, John, on the adult education underspend, I just wonder if it would be worthwhile for the new members of the committee to make clear that this is partly because we're checking much more carefully on what providers are actually delivering, and that the fact that we're checking very carefully on what they're delivering means that we get to keep what they don't deliver and recycle it. I hope I've got that right, and if I have, perhaps you could just confirm it.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if there's any detailed questions on that, it might be obviously Parminder is closer to the detail on that. So especially in terms of the provisions that are being undertaken in order to move the programme forward. But yes, that's my understanding.
Brilliant, thank you. Any questions from anybody else on the paper? Lynn.
There's mention in little b of 3.4 of a delay, I think, in delays in creating legal contracts between the Combined Authority and Growth Company. Now, I just wondered why. What's caused the delay? And I was also just a little bit concerned about under D, where it ends up by saying it's unlikely they will impact on the current financial year, the additional activities of the Health and Social Care Work Academy. And I just wondered, because that doesn't end until next April, and I just wondered whether that they meant current year or the previous year. Do you see what I mean?
So we are talking here in this paper about the financial year that has just ended. So yes, I think this is just a timing issue. So going back to the previous point, I think there have been some. Obviously, there's a lot of ongoing work between the Combined Authority and Growth Co, which is one of the subsidiary companies. I don't think there's anything necessarily to be concerned about. The legal team will be either taking these things in-house or getting external support to make sure that those contracts are in place. So I think there is a delay, but I don't think there's going to be an ongoing issue.
Thank you. That's very reassuring.
I've just got one more, if you don't mind, because it's one that I spotted again, because I asked this the last time, I think, and that's on the dashboard, where it's got some RAG ratings against the University of Peterborough, phase 1 red, then an amber one, and then on phase 3 red again. And I asked that about what that meant, basically, and was told, I think, in the March meeting that it would change, and it's not changed.
So perhaps I'll give you a bit of background. So phase 1 and phase 3, there are 2 subsidiary companies that deal with the development of the University of Peterborough. Call them Propco 1 and Propco 2. So Propco 1 deals with phase 1 and phase 3. In terms of phase 1, that is the first building, which is nearing completion. I think it's red because currently there are, I know there's been a lot of work in terms of getting of new students. Obviously, this is the first time it will have students studying there. The first cohort or the first entry will be in September, October time. And I think the risk there is just in terms of ensuring that there are student populations actually signing up and joining the university. Phase 2, that's Propco 2. So that is that's a joint venture with one of our partners, Photocentric. And phase 3, that is the development of the third phase of the university, which has been supported by government grant, which is going directly to Peterborough City Council. And that will be funding which will then be invested into phase 3. I think the concern there is more in terms of inflation, impact of inflation. So in phase 1, we have been able to ensure that contracts with developers have included elements for inflation. So we've been able to de-risk any increase in costs going forward. Obviously, members will be aware that inflation is of great concern. It's one of our overall, in terms of the combined authority, one of our key risks, and it has been less easy to be able to de-risk those concerns in the development of the contract. But that is all being considered by the board and our delivery partners. So we're looking very closely in terms of managing those risks.
Thank you very much indeed, John. That's very helpful. I slightly wonder whether when we have our interim meetings, we might have a look at some point at the data we're being presented with, because I think that the data on the dashboard is not, the skills data isn't hugely helpful. So just reviewing how we do that might be worth doing at some point. Yeah,
and it's also, John, you probably know more than I do, but we've also changed our RAG rating system. And so therefore more projects have gone to amber and red, just because the default is now amber rather than green. So that's something that we probably need to provide additional information so that people understand the new way in how PMO are rating projects.
That's a very odd thing to do.
That's correct, isn't it, John?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
I think, yes, some information about that would be very helpful. It sounds like an unusual step to have taken. So yes, please, some more information on that. Okay, I don't see any other hands on this item. So thank you very much, John. Very nice to see you online, Julia, and thank you for joining us. It will be nice to meet you in person at some point, but thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to the next item. I think, sorry, we don't need to vote on that one. Lovely. Okay. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the report from the Employment and Skills Board meeting on the 17th of May. So Fliss.
Very short report. This is just to update you on the discussions that we had, and as it was on the 17th of May, We looked at the employment and skills strategy and also the economic growth strategy and how we will be taking forward the implementation plans for both of those strategies. In addition, as we have the Chamber of Commerce, the Chief Exec, Vic, was in attendance and also notified the board about the intention to submit expression of interest to lead the local skills improvement plan within the combined authority area. That bid was submitted. I'm unsure of the timeline of when we are likely to hear whether or not that was successful. And again, we also received a presentation on Multiply and Core SPF and took comments from the Employment and Skills Board. We had a further update on GrowthWorks, very similar to what we have done here today, and also noted the additional funding coming in through the Careers Hub and also the Skills Bootcamps as well. And it's just to let you know as well that we are seeking to recruit new members to that board, and the next meeting is next week.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fliss. Any questions on that? Nope. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to the next meeting. And then I think we move to our final item, which is the Skills Committee agenda plan, and which we have a question from Andy on. So quite a short question and a short answer.
Thank you, Chair. And fortuitously, I had a meeting with Fliss where my answer was given then, but I'll ask the question anyway, which is, given the current situation at CPCA, the ONS lead member would like to understand whether there are enough staff within the department to deliver the skills agenda.
Excellent. And the answer is that the skills team has to date retained all of their staff team, and the team has been successful in winning additional funding, and recruitment is underway to recruit more people into the team because they're going to be doing a bigger job. So I would really like to say how very lucky we are to have such a fantastic team within the skills section of the Combined Authority. They are the best of the Combined Authority, I might want to say. I probably shouldn't say that, but I think so. And we do really appreciate you all. So thank you for all the work that you're doing, and for being so successful in bringing more money into this department in the Combined Authority. And because actually the important thing is that we are making sure we're getting better education done for those people in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who really need it. So thank you for your question, John. Andy, does the rest of the committee have any comments on the agenda plan? It's not on the agenda plan, but I think we do want to have that informal meeting, and we will set that up. So thank you all very much for your time. Very good to have you all here, and see you. The date of the next meeting is on the 5th of September. So I'll see you in September, but I hope to see you all well before that, probably online for a